For many years, space was quiet. Humans had built stations around the moon, colonies on Mars, and listening posts far beyond. They watched the stars, hoping to find friends or to prepare for enemies. At first, they heard only silence. Just stars. Just dust. Just time passing. But then, the silence broke. It started with a signal. One station far out in the black received a sound. No one understood it. It wasn't a language. It wasn't music. It wasn't a pattern. It was just strange. And then the station went dark. No warning. No explosion. No life sign. It was as if it had never been there. Another station tried to send help. That ship also vanished. Within weeks, 7 stations were gone. People on Earth were afraid, but the government said not to worry. They called it a technical problem, a system glitch, space debris, anything but the truth. But those who watched the skies knew this was not a glitch. This was a message. In the dark, across the far side of the solar system, something was moving. It was quiet, slow, but coming closer. A single word came from the last outpost. Coming. After that, nothing. For a time, people stopped looking up. Fear became normal. They tried to live normal lives. But the silence now felt louder than any scream. A young technician on Earth, working late at night, noticed something strange. A pattern in the old signals. It wasn't random. It was timed. Slow, cold, steady. It was like breathing, whatever was out there. It was alive. And it was listening back. The Earth Council held a secret meeting. The best minds were called in, not just soldiers, not just scientists, but thinkers, historians, psychologists, even poets. They had one question. Who were these beings? No answer came. There were no faces, no voice, no message. Only silence and the growing number of missing stations. A shadow passed the edge of Neptune. Cameras caught only a blur. It was huge. Not a ship, but something bigger. A fleet. A living creature. No one knew. What was clear? It was not human. And it was moving toward Earth. They called them the conquerors. No one knew where they came from or what they looked like. But one thing became certain. Wherever they went, nothing remained. Not metal, not stone, not even memory. Old records from alien ruins, long dead, were decoded. One single phrase repeated in many tongues. They take everything. Planets? Histories, names, entire species vanished from time itself. The conquerors left no graves, no ruins, no stories. Just emptiness. But Earth was different. The conquerors had never faced humans before. Humans remembered. They wrote. They shared. And most of all, they fought. The first defense fleet was prepared. Ships were moved into position. Stations were powered up. Earth sent one message into the dark. We are not afraid. But the stars gave no reply. Until one day, something arrived. Black, silent, shaped like no design humans ever imagined. It didn't fire. It didn't speak. It simply waited at the edge of the moon. Then came the message. Not in words. Not in sound. It appeared on every screen, every device, all at once. Surrender. No name. No explanation. Just one word. Earth had 1 hour to respond. Inside the command center, no one spoke. No one moved. The weight of that word sat on every chest. One old man who had fought in the last war between Earth's nations looked at the screen and whispered, "They've already taken too much. If we surrender, we're not alive. We're just waiting to disappear." The Earth Council made a decision. They sent one word back. Nitrogen monoxide. The silence broke. The conquerors moved. Their ship turned toward Earth, faster than light. The war had begun. But this time, the story would be different. Because, for the first time in history, the last war would begin with us. Asterisk. The enemy ship moved. Silently across space. No lights. No sound. No fear. It passed by the moon like a shadow, heading straight toward Earth. People watched from their screens. Children cried. Soldiers held their weapons. Pilots waited in their seats. But the ship could not fire. It just watched. For one whole day, it floated in orbit, above cities, oceans, and forests. It moved slowly, as if studying Earth. Some called it a warning. Others called it a test, and then it sent another message. This time, it was a voice. Cold, flat, empty of emotion. One world, one choice. Obey or vanish. Earth didn't answer. Inside the Global Defense Center, leaders debated. Some wanted to talk, others wanted to run. But most were silent. Then a young woman stood up. Not a soldier, not a general, a signal analyst. She had spent years listening to alien signals, searching for patterns. She said, "This isn't the first time they've said these words. I found the same message in the last signal from the red system, just before it was erased. They do this everywhere," she said. "They don't negotiate. They don't stop. They don't even care what we are." A commander looked out the window at the dark ship and whispered, "Then it's not a warning. It's a countdown." That night, Earth answered back. A signal was sent. It was short, sharp, spoken in every human language. "We are not like the others. We do not kneel. We are Earth." Then Earth fired first. A small missile, not nuclear, just a message. A strike near the enemy ship close enough to show power far enough to avoid war. But the enemy took it as one thing only: defiance. The ship turned red. Its silent body glowed like fire without flame. Then it vanished. Gone in a blink. Alarms rang. Satellites detected it reappear behind the moon base. Seconds later, the base was gone. Not destroyed, deleted. 1 second, it was there. The next, it was empty space. No explosion. No smoke. Just nothing. Earth. Trembled. But even in fear, humans didn't stop. Factories lit up. Ships were launched. Thousands of minds worked together. People who had never spoken before now shared data, ideas. Defenses. This was not just a fight to survive. It was a fight to exist. The conquerors had always won. Every world they visited, they erased. Every species they met, they silenced. But Earth did something no one else ever did. It fought back before the war even started. Across space. The enemy fleet awoke. Long ships, dark and alive, began to move from ancient hiding places. They rose from dead stars, from gas clouds, from places thought to be empty for millions of years. They moved as one. They had crushed thousands of worlds, but Earth was waiting deep under the ice of Antarctica. Earth's first weapon activated a beam made to slice through black matter. Above Mars, drones flew like metal birds, armed with strange weapons copied from ancient alien ruins. Around Earth, 12 defense rings turned, each carrying enough force to break moons. And yet, fear remained because humans didn't know if they could win, but they knew one thing for sure. They would not die silent. They would scream into the void. They would fight, even in darkness. They would make the enemy remember their name, the first. A real battle happened over Jupiter. The enemy sent 3 ships. Earth sent 50. The fight lasted 1 hour, and Earth won. But not because of weapons, not because of numbers, because of something no one expected: human unpredictability. One pilot turned off all systems and drifted through space like wreckage, hiding in a field of debris. When the enemy passed, she lit her engines and fired from behind. Another used his ship to crash into the enemy reactor, knowing he would not return. But he took one with him. And then came the most surprising thing of all. The enemy ship ran for the first time. In thousands of years, a conqueror fled. A whisper spread through the stars. Even in silence, Earth is different. Earth is dangerous. Earth will not fall. Back on Earth, a child drew pictures of the sky. He colored the enemy ships black. But he drew Earth ships in silver. And in the corner, he wrote with a shaky hand, "They always won. But now, we are the storm." And far away, in a dark place with no stars, the oldest of the conquerors opened its eyes. It felt something it hadn't felt in ages. Not anger. Not pride, but something new. Uncertainty. Because for the first time, the question wasn't, how fast will they fall? But rather, what if they don't? The silence didn't last long. After Earth's surprise win near Jupiter, the stars changed. The enemy didn't speak. They didn't threaten. They just began to move. Thousands of black ships, shaped like knives, poured out from places no one had ever seen before, hiding inside hollow moons, floating under gas clouds, sleeping inside dead stars. They moved like a tide, slow, cold, unstoppable. Earth's victory was real but small, and the enemy was no longer curious. They were now angry. The next target was the moon. It was Earth's oldest colony, a symbol of first steps, a place of science, of dreams. Now it would become a battlefield. An engineer stood alone in Luna 12 station. He looked out the window as stars dimmed. I don't see stars anymore, he whispered into his recorder. Just shadows. Outside, a shape covered half the sky. He didn't finish his message. The moon. Shook. The first wave hit fast. Enemy ships came from the dark side of the moon, cloaked in silence. No energy signals, no engine heat. Just movement like ghosts gliding. Through space, Earth's defense grid lit up. Lasers fired. Missiles launched. Satellites turned and screamed warnings back to Earth. The first human fleet, over 200 ships strong, met them head on, but the enemy didn't fight like humans. They didn't dodge, they didn't defend, they moved straight into fire. Losing ship after ship, but never slowing down. It was a test. They wanted to see how humans reacted, and they learned fast. One Earth pilot, flying an old rusted freighter turned gunship, turned off all lights and floated into the middle of the enemy formation. He waited. They scanned, ignored him, passed him. Then he lit the engines, spun behind them, and opened fire. 2 enemy ships went dark. In another part of the sky, a squad of drone pilots flew their ships in a spiral pattern. It confused the enemy's aim. Lasers missed. The drones got close. Too close. They exploded themselves, turning their deaths into weapons. The enemy had no answer for this. They were strong. Yes. Fast. Yes. But they were predictable. Humans were not. The conquerors didn't panic. They adapted. They began copying tactics, using fake ships as decoys, sending waves of smaller drones ahead to test Earth's weapons. The moon's surface became fire. Craters turned into glass. Stations melted into smoke. Earth called in reinforcements from Mars, from deep orbit, from underground bases no one even knew existed. The sky above the moon became a burning sea, and then they sent it. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't alive. It was something else. Round, quiet, floating above the battle like a god. One general called it the red eye because it pulsed with a strange red glow wherever it looked. Ships died. No explosion. No damage. Just death. A ship would go still. No systems. No life. Like time had been erased. Earth's fleet pulled back. Even the bravest pilots felt something deep in their minds when the red eye turned. A pressure. A whisper. A wordless fear. As if it wasn't just a weapon, but a warning. But humans didn't stop. A scientist on Earth, watching the battle from deep within an ice base, noticed something strange. The red eye only worked if it had a clear line of sight. Dust, smoke, debris. It couldn't see through them. She sent a message. Blinded? Minutes later, Earth's ships dropped giant shields, walls of metal and rock pulled from asteroid belts. Others launched fields of reflective gas. The red eye blinked. And then, for the first time, it was hit. A single railgun, fired from an old mining ship on Mars, struck it dead center. The red eye cracked. And vanished. The tide changed. The enemy ship stopped. Some exploded. Others simply floated, lost without orders. The battlefield went quiet. Earth had done it again. They had defended. The moon. They had struck fear into the unbeatable. But it wasn't over. In the darkness beyond Pluto, something moved, bigger than anything ever seen. Not a ship, not a weapon. A world. A mobile planet of metal and black flame. The home of the conquerors was coming. Not to watch, not to test, but to end. Back on Earth. Under the stars, a soldier stood. With his daughter Dot, she pointed up at the moon, half covered in scars. Did we win? She asked. He looked at the sky, the smoke, the wreckage. Dot, then he smiled. No, he said. We made them bleed. Asterisk. The battlefield above the moon still floated. In silence. Broken ships, burned metal, drifting soldiers, some dead, some still breathing through cracked helmets, floated in the black sky. It had been Earth's greatest stand, and somehow they had not only survived. They had hurt the conquerors. In all their long history. The enemy had never lost twice, never needed to retreat, never been wounded. But now their machines had failed. Their red eye had cracked. Their perfect plan had been broken by a world that shouldn't have lasted 5 minutes. Inside a dark ship far beyond Pluto, something stirred. Not a person, not a creature, something older, something buried beneath. Metal and time. It watched the battle through quiet eyes. And then, for the first time in its long, cold life, it remembered pain. Pain was not normal for the conquerors. Their minds were linked, their orders were absolute, their thoughts clean like glass. They didn't feel as others did. But now, something strange was spreading among them. Across their communication grid. A new signal echoed. It wasn't a command. It wasn't an alarm. It was a question. What are they? Not what do they want, or why do they fight, but simply what are they? Because the conquerors had faced strength before. They had erased creatures more intelligent, more advanced, even more ruthless than humans. But never. Never a species that used failure as fuel. Never an enemy that kept smiling through blood. Never a species that remembered every wound and wore it like armor. They began studying Earth's history. Not their weapons, but their stories. Wars, rebellions, sacrifices, cities rebuilt after fire. Children born in ruins, leaders who rose from nothing. People who laughed under bombs. It made no sense. And yet, the more they looked, the more the conquerors saw something terrifying. Humans don't stop. Not when they're outnumbered. Not when they're broken. Not even when they're dying. For the first time in all the records of all the lost civilizations, the conquerors hesitated. They didn't send the next wave. They didn't launch the next attack. They watched. Waited. But Earth was not waiting. From secret bunkers under oceans. From hidden stations inside asteroids, from ice caves on Europa, humanity was preparing something. Not just weapons, not just ships. They were preparing an idea, a message, one that would be sent across the stars. It would not say, help us. It would say, join us. Because Earth knew something that conquerors never understood. Hope is a weapon. In the shadows of destroyed worlds. The last survivors, the broken, the forgotten, the scattered were listening, and they heard Earth's voice, a voice that said, you are not alone. Ships began lighting up in old systems. Long dead outposts blinked back to life. Unburned. Planets where nothing was meant to remain, tiny groups rose, holding pieces of stolen tech, old maps, or just the will to stand again. Because if Earth could fight, maybe they could too, but Earth's leaders knew what was coming. They had wounded a giant. And now the giant would wake, high above Saturn, deep inside an invisible ship. A message arrived. A voice the conquerors hadn't heard in ages. The first voice, the one who had started it all. It simply said, no more games. And so the decision was made. They would send the core, the weapon that had turned suns into ash. The machine that had erased empires with a single breath. They called it Silence Bringer, but Earth was already moving. A plan had begun, bold, wild, risky. They would strike first. Not to win, but to show the stars one last truth, that humans are not just survivors. They are a warning. The silence before the storm had already passed. Now, humanity would become the storm itself. There was a world once called Veltra. It was green, rich, full of music and light. Its cities floated in the air. Its people lived without war. They believed peace was stronger than fire. And so when the conquerors came, they opened their arms. Instead of raising their shields, that world is now dust. Not burned, not broken, erased, no data, no ruins, no signs of life. Even their stars no longer sing their name. As if the conquerors swallowed them whole and spat out silence. It was the kind of silence Earth refused to accept. So they sent a ship. It wasn't a warship. It was small, quiet, a search vessel. A group of scientists and explorers, not soldiers. But they were armed not with weapons, but with something even more dangerous. Questions. They reached what remained of Veltra's orbit. Nothing was left. No gravity, no color, just floating ash. But as they scanned deeper, something appeared. Shape. Small, cracked. ALIFEPOD. Old. Almost out of power. And inside it, barely breathing, was someone. They didn't know her name. She couldn't speak. Her body had changed from too much radiation. Her skin no longer like anything human or alien. But her eyes were full of fire. They brought her to the ship. And slowly, she began to draw. With shaking hands, she showed what she remembered. Circles, lines, symbols. Then faces. Not her people's faces, theirs, the conquerors. Or at least the masks they wore. She had seen them up close. She had survived them. Her story came in pieces like broken glass. But the crew began to understand. Veltra had not been erased because it was weak. It had been erased because it had seen something. Something the conquerors wanted hidden. Not a secret about weapons. A secret about themselves. They weren't invincible. They weren't united. They weren't gods. They were afraid of being known because the more others remembered, the more cracks appeared in their image. That was their true fear, not defeat, but exposure. They didn't erase planets to win. They erased them to be forgotten. And humanity was the one thing they couldn't silence, because humans remembered everything. Every war, every scar, every lost name. They built walls of memory around their pain. They turned stories into swords. They carried the dead with them on flags, in books, in songs. And now they carried this broken survivor. Not just as a witness, but as proof. Back on Earth, a decision was made. They would send a signal into deep space. It wasn't a call for help. It was a memory. Voices of thousands mothers who lost children, soldiers who lost limbs, explorers who lost homeworlds, each one recorded, one after another, reading the names of every world the conquerors had destroyed. Name after name, voice after voice. Hours long, days long. They broadcast it on every channel, every frequency, in every language. They didn't ask anyone to fight. They only asked them to remember. And across the stars, someone listened. In quiet places, in forgotten corners, in systems too scared to breathe. The memory spread. The conquerors tried to jam it, shut it down, destroy every relay. But memory moves faster than fire. It traveled through data cracks, through black market traders, through forgotten machines left on dead moons, and one by one, the fires began to rise. Tiny rebellions, rogue fleets, people who had once bowed, now stood. The skies above those broken worlds began to burn again, not from destruction, but from hope. The fire wasn't war yet. It was refusal. And to the conquerors, that was more dangerous than a gun. They sent a final message to Earth. This time, it wasn't a command. It wasn't a warning. It was a question. Why do you keep fighting? And Earth answered not with words. They showed the survivor from Veltra standing beside a child from Earth, both watching the stars. They showed soldiers carrying books, not just rifles. They showed burned cities being rebuilt by people who had nothing left but will die. And then came the voice of an old man from Earth. Quiet but clear, because forgetting is the last kind of death. And we don't die easy. The message ended, but the fire did not. It spread. And in the black heart of the enemy's empire, the oldest among them felt something deep and unfamiliar. It wasn't rage. It wasn't fear. It was the cold chill of being known. Of being remembered. And for the first time, they realized this wasn't just a war. It was a story. And Earth was not the villain. Earth was the pen. And the next chapter was coming. Asterisk in the black silence between stars. Something had changed. The conquerors no longer spoke with certainty. Their messages, once cold, commanding, grew slower. The perfect rhythm of their empire had a crack in it now. And the crack had a name. Earth. They had wiped out thousands of civilizations. They had erased entire species without a second thought. But they had never faced a world that refused to forget. Now, the memory Earth had released, those names, those voices, that endless list of pain was growing louder. Across the galaxy. People who had been silent for generations were speaking again. And some were not just speaking. They were fighting. Ships once used for mining turned into weapons. Moon bases long abandoned began lighting up. Colonies the conquerors thought were empty launched stolen torpedoes and vanished into shadow. But it wasn't chaos. It was coordination. Earth wasn't just surviving now. It was leading. A rebel fleet, unknown and scattered, had begun to unite. Under a single signal Earth's broadcast, they had reached more than 1,000,000 systems. And on the edge of every one, the conquerors saw the same image carved into walls, drawn onto broken metal. Sprayed in fire across their black ships, a human hand holding a torch, not a weapon. Memory. The conquerors called for silence, but silence no longer answered them. They tried again to send the silence bringer, a weapon that could swallow light, then thought. And memory. They sent it toward Earth. But it never arrived. It vanished halfway through space. The conquerors scanned, waited, searched. And then the truth hit them. Earth had taken it. Not destroyed. Taken. No one had ever stolen from the conquerors. Before, no one had ever captured one of their greatest weapons and dragged it into a hidden system for study. But humans had done it. And more than that, they had understood it, because Earth had scientists who had studied pain, soldiers who had faced mind-warping fear, and thinkers who asked one question no other species had ever dared. What if we turned their weapons into ours? The conquerors felt something they had no word for. Not fear, not confusion. Something worse. Disruption. Their order was breaking. One of their own, an old leader from the First Age, sent a quiet signal to the others. It was simple. Earth is not a threat we destroy. It is a threat we become. But it was already too late. Deep inside a gravity well, a secret fleet built by Earth launched its first jump. Not to defend, not to hide, but to enter the enemy's space. They didn't strike a base. They didn't aim for a fleet. They landed on a forgotten world. One that the conquerors had erased long ago. In there, deep underground, Earth found something no one expected. A voice. It wasn't human. It was old, broken, artificial. A machine that had survived destruction by staying. Hidden in silence for centuries. It had one job. To remember. It told the story of the first species the conquerors had tried to erase. A species that had nearly beaten them. But no one ever knew, because their story had been buried. Until now. Earth listened. They recorded. And they spread that story. 2. One by one, they gave the galaxy not just their pain, but every pain the conquerors had tried to hide. It wasn't war. Not yet. It was something worse. Revelation. Truth is louder than missiles. And across the conqueror's empire, their control began to die. Whole systems stopped sending reports. Some of their own machines began to ask questions. And then came the spark. An entire conqueror fleet, 50 ships, refused an order. They didn't join Earth. They didn't turn against their kind. They simply stopped. Stopped obeying. Stopped moving. Stopped believing. Because they had started to remember. 2. That's when the conquerors realized Earth had done what no weapon could do. It had infected them with doubt. The war was no longer about territory. It was about truth. Earth was no longer a target. Earth was an idea, and ideas don't die. The stars were no longer quiet. They sang the signals. Not from the conquerors, but from the broken, the forgotten, the rising. The dead empires that once hid in fear were now breathing again. Their ashes had formed sparks, and every spark came from the same place. Earth. The world the conquerors thought would fall quickly had lasted longer than any other. And Now it was no longer standing alone. It was leading something the galaxy had never seen before. Not an army, not a rebellion, a chain. Reaction. Ideas had spread. Truth had shattered walls that no weapon could break. Old allies of the conquerors had turned silent. Others had quietly disappeared. And even inside their own fleets, questions had begun to grow. Why do they fight? Why do they remember? Why? Aren't they broken? But no one had the answer, not even the first voice, the oldest being among the conquerors, born in the age before stars. It had watched thousands of species rise and fall. It had erased worlds with the blink of thought, but it had never faced this, because Earth had done something no one else dared. They changed the war. They made it personal. It was no longer about power or fear or territory. It was about something deeper. A battle over who gets to write this story of the galaxy. And Earth had chosen to write it in flame, in memory, and in the blood of those who could not speak for themselves. The final move had begun. The conquerors brought forth the last of their power. They called it the Hollow World, a moving machine. The size of a planet, built to collapse systems into darkness. It could break a sun in half. It had done it before Doubt, and now it moved toward Earth. Faster than anything had ever moved. Nothing could stop it. But Earth wasn't trying to stop it. They were waiting for what? Not a fleet. Not a weapon. A moment. On Earth, deep beneath the ground. In a bunker of old steel, people didn't cry. They didn't pray. They watched the sky and told stories. They remembered the moon battle. The voices of the erased. The survivor of VILTRA. And then from every corner of space, something happened that had never happened before. The rest of the galaxy answered. Thousands. Of ships, human, alien, artificial, jumped into the path of the Hollow World. They didn't match its size. They couldn't match its strength. But they stood together, and that was enough to make the conquerors pause just for a second. And that second was everything. Because Earth had prepared a final message. Not a signal, a story. They sent it not through wires or satellites, but through the mind, using the core of the Silence Bringer, the one weapon they had captured. They launched a psychic memory bomb, not to destroy. To show. Suddenly, every conqueror felt it. Not pain. Memory. They saw the eyes of children, watching stars die. They felt the wind of lost worlds. They heard the last words of soldiers who never surrendered. They tasted the fear of mothers hiding their children underground. As the sky turned red, they felt humanity's truth, not in words, but in the soul. And in that moment, everything changed. The Hollow World slowed. The fleet behind it hesitated. Some turned away. Some turned around. The first voice, who had never spoken to any lesser species, opened its mind for the first time in eons. And it saw something impossible. It saw itself in the humans. The need to endure. To. They remembered. To matter. And then finally, it understood the answer to the question that had haunted them. Why do they fight? Because they refuse to be forgotten. Because memory is louder than death. Because they carry the dead with them. And let them speak, because humans are not just alive. They make others live again. First voice tried to shut it out, but it was too late. The story had already been told, and once the story is told, you can't erase it. The Hollow World stopped. It did not fire. It did not fall. It simply turned away. And for the first time since the stars were young, the conquerors left. Not in defeat. In surrender. They left without a word. And Earth did not chase them, because they didn't need to. They had already won. In the years that followed, the galaxy began to rebuild. New alliances formed. New worlds were born. And in every city, on every wall, one phrase was carved in hundreds of languages. Not a warning. A memory. For ages they conquered. But the last war began with us. And across the stars, a quiet truth burned brighter than any sun. You can erase people. You can burn their cities. But as long as someone remembers their name, they are never truly gone. And Earth remembers everything.